So in the previous view, we added lights to our scene, uh, to our model. And so we put some down lights in there now. And what we want to do now is render this so that we can see the effect of our lights as well as our materials and our everything like that. Simple realistic rendering doesn't uh, render your lights. Okay, it's just a shaded process, so it really doesn't give you the full impact. What we need to do is actually go through a rendering. There's two ways to render. One is if you go into views, okay, you're going to see right here on this presentation tab, okay, you'll see a render here creates a photorealistic image of the model. This uses your model and the content and renders it on your machine. Okay, you'll see this render to cloud. Okay, this does the same thing as this does, only it renders it to the cloud of Autodesk. In other words, it goes out to Autodesk Cloud. If you have a registered version, which you should, there's no reason not to because it's free. Okay, if you're professional, you would have to pay for this service. But it's free to students. So if you're just using your A360, what they call the A360 account, and you should just be logged in. So if you're logged in, and you should be to be able to use your license. And then this other icon here shows you renderings, existing renderings that you've already done. I'm going to click on this. Okay. And it's going to go to my renderings website. And you'll see right here, this is the rendering that I already did. Okay. We can go in here and view the project. The project's been given a name, and if I render everything to this same Revit file, okay, it'll show me. And of course, I don't really have any materials set. Remember I said that this would, when it rendered, well, I haven't said that yet, but I'll tell you later what happened. But you can see everything is a white material right now, except for, say, the stainless steel on the dishwasher right here and aluminum settings, anodized aluminum settings. This is red. Remember, if you remember, those chairs were red, but because of the nature of this light, okay, it's evidently in a very cool spectrum, and so it's not rendering. It's rendering more of a brown than a red. So lighting has a lot to do with how colors are perceived, and we can barely see it. It's not really showing us the divisions as it would in reality, because these desks probably aren't cambered on the edges. But anyway, it gives me a good idea of, okay, it's a nice lighting. And there's other analysis that we can do on lighting and we'll talk about those in environmental systems next semester. So let's go back now to our, we'll just drop down out of that, and we'll go back here and set up a rendering. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this render. This is under View, okay, the View tab, Render, and you'll get this dialog box. Okay, this is your rendering dialog box, and then you have a lot of settings in here, and I'll really briefly explain these settings. There's really, renderings, and rendering is really almost a whole class in and of itself, especially if you start getting into lighting and issues having to do with lighting, which make or break any rendering, as they do any photograph. So you'll see different levels right here. I'm just going to set this to high. Okay. If I was maybe doing, some preliminary renderings, I'd go medium or draft, just so I could very quickly. The higher you set this, the longer it takes to render. Okay. So just remember that. So high settings. Do I want a screen resolution? In other words, 96 dpi is the default for screen resolution. Most screens are not over 96 dpi, so that's, pretty good. But I'm going to go to a printer. Okay, so I want a little bit higher rendering, and you can see I have 150, 300, 600 dpi. Okay, I would probably, for this purpose, I'm not going to, spend the time to run a 300 or 600 dpi. I'm just going to make this 150 dpi, and you can see at 150 dpi, this image is going to be 1489 pixels in width, and its height is going to be 6, so it's about a 9 by 6 or 10 by 6 image, okay, or 10 by 7 image, and you'll see 1025 pixels. Okay, of course, if I give myself enough pixels, I can, adjust it. You'll see the uncompressed image is going to be right around 5.8 megabytes. Okay, so it's going to be a fairly large image. And then the next thing I want to do is set up, well, my lighting and what I'm going to be doing. If you're doing an exterior, you need to set this to one of these exterior settings. If we're doing an interior, you need to set this to one of the interior settings. This is one thing that many people forget to do, and therefore they're rendering an exterior and this setting is set to interior, and of course it doesn't work very well. Okay, so we're going to interior, we're going to exclude the sun in this case because we haven't really set the sun up, and we're going to do this as if it's a nighttime, actually a very, very, very dark nighttime. I would normally have some kind of lighting outside because it's never totally dark. But in our case, we're just going to do the artificial only. And the artificial only lights are the lights that we have in this room alone. Okay. And then the sun settings we don't have to worry about because we have no sun, and you'll see that this is grayed out anyway. So we can't, because we're only doing artificial. And then right here, this is an important tab. If I click on this, you're going to see the list of all of our lights. And of course, if this is a whole project, we could have 100, 200 lights in this whole project, which would be a total nightmare to control. So what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to create a group, okay? And I'm going to be new. And I recommend you do this as you put lights in, okay? Organize it, not after the fact, because it becomes a real nightmare, and be, diligent about this. But I'm going to call this community room so that we know all these lights belong to this particular room, okay? And then I'm going to move these lights. I'm going to select one and then hold the control key down and select all the others. I think I can also hold the shift key down and select them. Yep. Nope. Let's see. Shift. Yep, that works too. And then I'm going to move to a group community room. And you'll see now, okay, they're under this group called community room. And I can spread this out a little bit. Okay, and you can see down light. I could rename these, but this is the light fixture. You probably don't want to, because this is the light fixture that you put in. These little check marks right here, this is, as it says here, this is the on and off. So if I want to turn a particular light off, I can just uncheck that, and that particular light will be turned off. This is the dimming factor. So if I want to dim it some, I can put a value from 0 to 1 in there. 1 is 100%, and any number less than that, down to 0, would be off, right? So dimmed to a level of being off. But or if I wanted to turn everything off in a community room, I could just click the group and turns everything off in the community room. Since I have no other lights, I want to keep these all on, of course, right now. And of course, I can rename and edit and so forth. So we got my artificial lights turned on. This is a background. Since we don't have any light outside, and we're only doing the interior, and we don't have any light out here, this really doesn't matter what we set it to, and you'll see why when we go to render the result. This is going to be highly reflective because there's no light from the outside, so we can't see anything outside this window. So it's just going to totally reflect everything, almost like a mirror. But I could set this for different kind of the sky portion of this, the area above the model, as very cloudy, few clouds, so forth. I can set the sky conditions. Once again, environmental systems, we'll talk more about this. And then I can set a color. So if I just wanted it to be pink, I could say pink. Or if I was using a green screen kind of condition, I could set this to a particular green, which will allow me to then put a moving image in there. Or I could put an image itself. I could, which I don't recommend you use this. what I recommend you do is if you want an image, the context to be in here, click transparent here, and then anything that sees the sky, for instance, any of this glass, all this white here is the sky right now. Anything we see right here, that's going to be rendered as an alpha channel. You may be familiar with that from Photoshop and bitmap images anywhere, and that allow me to come in and slide an image on a different layer inside Photoshop behind here and move it and adjust it and size it and everything. So anyway, and then adjust exposure. These exposure settings, they're similar to a camera. You'll see white point here. If you're familiar with with photography, you know what the white point is. If you don't, then you need to look it up. I can't go into all of this. Exposure value, highlights, shadows. Once again, this isn't a rendering class, so I'm not going to get into all that. I just leave the defaults here unless you know what you're doing. The one thing that you may want to adjust is shadows, and that makes the shadows really dark or really light. Most shadows, because there's additional light around, aren't dark. So I'd probably keep the defaults here until you know what you're doing. And I'm going to say OK to that. I'm ready to render now. OK, and if I click render here now, this is going to render on my machine, and it's going to use all my resources. It's going to lock down Revit, and I'm not going to be able to use Revit. I'm not going to be able to work because it's going to use every resource I have. So I'm not even going to be able to open up any other programs pretty much because I won't have any RAM or CPU speed. So I don't want to do this, but I've got my settings for this image set. So I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to go to render to cloud. And I'm going to send this out to the cloud. Once again, you have to be logged in to your A360 account, okay, which you had to get in order to download the software and have a licensed version of the software. I'm going to click on the A360, and you'll see here step 1, step 2, step 3. It's going to walk you through. It's really pretty simple, straightforward once you have all those settings set. Don't show this message, well, I'm going to let it show it. So we're going to go here. You'll see to render, I have 0 credits. It doesn't matter, okay? If you're a professional and you had a professional registered version of Revit, then it would matter because you have to have credits here to be able to render. Students are given unlimited, as far as I know, credits. You'll see views, okay? I can click here, and then I can check all the views that I want to render. So if I had 2 or 3 perspectives, or interior camera views that I wanted to render, I could select all of those and render them at one time. My output, is it going to be a still image or a panoramic image or a stereo panorama? Or an illuminance, and you probably don't know what those are, so don't worry about them. We're just going to do a still image. We're going to use standard or final. Just to speed it up, I'm going to use standard, okay, render quality, and go ahead and you do that too. And then I'm going to have it limit the image size, to probably a large. Okay, that'll give me enough pixels that I can size this thing and give me a pretty good printout. Okay, and then I'm going to say exposure, advanced, native. Native means that it's using the current settings that you have set up. So advanced settings are automatic settings that Autodesk sets up in the cloud rendering process. I wouldn't use that. I would use native settings. In other words, the settings that we set up here in presentation. And then you'll see this is going to cost me 1 credit. And of course, you have unlimited credit, so you don't really have to worry about this. I want to be notified when this is finished rendering. It can take, it depends, on how much activity there is on the cloud. End of semesters, I found that there's so many students using this that it can be pretty slow. It might take 3 or 4 hours before you get something back. In this case, we're going to get something back probably in about 10 minutes. I'm going to show you the results here in just a second, as I did before. But we'll go ahead and render this, and you'll see it's gathering scene information, uploading the scene, and now it's uploaded to you know, to render online. Okay, I can go through now and do whatever I want to do in Revit. I can continue to work on my model. I have complete control of all my computing resources. Uh, I could even close Revit and move on and go do some work in Photoshop or something like that if I wanted to. If I want to see the status, there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is to go look at your render progress through here, okay? And this is going to open up your rendering, and you'll see right here it's not rendered yet. Here's a previous rendering, uh, and so it's working on it. The other is that you know the other method or means. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Is to go to here to presentation and your render gallery, which is what we just looked at. And well, not exactly, but yeah, it does. We just looked at the render gallery, and if you go to render gallery, it'll take you here to the same place. Okay, and so these are your current renderings, and depending on the name of the file, you're created in a sense of folder. You'll see that these have different names in them, so they're in a different project. Okay, so if this was had the same name as these, it would be the second rendering in this project. But since I renamed the file, it's in a different project. If I go to View Project, it's going to show me all the renderings that I've done. It's already uploaded it. Okay, if it hadn't uploaded it, it would have told me it'll be 10 minutes. It's in the queue. It'll be 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes or so. And then here you can see it's starting to do what is called a ray trace. Okay, so it's going to take about 2 more minutes for it to finally finish rendering. And so anyway, it's refining it now. It's a really good rendering engine. You know, you'll see that this is a warm light. Okay, so everything, all the surfaces in here except for the terrazzo are pretty much white. I didn't change any of the materials. So you know, it's going to be a little off of pure white because these are incandescent bulbs, and the color temperature of an incandescent bulb is towards the kind of yellow side. So it's going to be probably a little yellow, a little bit more yellow than white. Okay, and so it's finished, and I was correct. Okay, so you can see, you know, maybe this isn't bright enough. Maybe I want to add some more light fixtures into here. You can see what I was talking about, that this becomes highly reflective because there's no light outside and this is glass. So anyway, that's how you do a rendering. This video is running a little long, but anyway, so the next, I'm going to show you how to set up a sheet for this particular project and bring in your views.